You're just a parasite living off of me. If you have a complaint, divorce me and get out." The beer he flung at me out of the blue, along with those words, left me stunned. Has he forgotten all that I had done till now? It's impossible for me to spend a lifetime with such a person. "All right," I said, and left the home that I had lived with my husband for many years. I couldn't possibly stand being called a parasite in silence. My name is Lisa Parker. I'm a 42-year-old housewife. My husband, Mark, is 4 years older than me at 46 and works for the local county office. We've been married for 12 years. We initially both worked, but I quit my job 5 years into our marriage. I actually wanted to continue working. I thought I'd have a child right after getting married, but I started feeling impatient as 2 years passed with no baby. I keenly felt the silent pressure from my in-laws who wanted to see their grandchild. When my mother-in-law finally said, "Is it because you're working that you can't have a child?" I decided to quit my job. I decided to focus on fertility treatments. Many people continue working while undergoing fertility treatments. But I've always had a weak constitution and was anxious about treatments while working. I remember Mark being happy when I quit my job and became a full-time housewife. He assured me that it would be easy to support me on his income alone. Despite quitting my job and becoming a housewife, we still don't have children. Mark was very supportive of the fertility treatments. We both loved children and wanted to have one soon. I think I felt a little rushed when my in-laws said they wanted to see their grandchild soon. There was a tremendous struggle before I came to the understanding that having a child doesn't necessarily go according to plan. 5 years have passed since then, and we're no longer undergoing fertility treatments. We tried various things, but we were not blessed with a child. Both Mark and I have had thorough examinations. We thought there might be a problem with one of us. I've heard that many husbands are reluctant to get tested. That was not the case with Mark. I remember feeling relieved when he willingly took the tests. The results showed that we were both healthy and normal, so it seems to be a matter of luck. Also, my health was at its limit to continue the fertility treatments. When I told Mark that I was taking a break from the treatments, his reaction was more intense than I had imagined. "What are you talking about now? Do you know how much the treatments have cost us? Are you planning to continue being a housewife without even undergoing treatments?" He kept blaming me and kept bringing up the cost of treatments. Yes, I know the treatments were expensive and difficult. I felt guilty, and I covered most of the treatment costs with my savings from when I was single. Despite knowing that, Mark kept saying that his hard-earned money was being wasted. "Hold on, that's too harsh. You know my body's at its limit, don't you?" Mark, who only talks about money without any words of concern for his wife's body, finally got to me. That really got my goat. I couldn't help but retort back in a loud voice. "If that's the case, you shouldn't have suggested infertility treatments in the first place." I, who usually never talk back, opposed, and it seemed Mark didn't like that. Yet, he couldn't seem to strongly rebut me. Perhaps he was remembering that he too had agreed to fertility treatments. That day, he left the house and didn't return for quite a while. We had a few fights about the treatment afterward, but things have somehow recently settled down. Maybe Mark has given up on the idea of having a child. I feel guilty about that, but I think we just have to accept that it was our fate. Life as just a couple isn't bad. That's what I kept telling myself. My classmates who have kids seem to be having a hard time financially. Many of my friends continue to work to secure their children's future and their own old age. Mark never outright says it, but he seems unsatisfied with me quitting the treatment and becoming a housewife. After much thought, I decided to start a side job that I could do from home. Immediately, I told Mark about it when he came home from work. Mark laughed at my story as if it was a joke. If it were that easy to make money, nobody would go out to work. Starting with those words, he started to endlessly talk about how busy he is working during the day. Most of it was complaints about dealing with the public. Mark, whose main job is dealing with the public at the counter, seems to be under a lot of stress. "A job you can do from home? Well, at least make enough for my allowance. Not that I'm expecting much." Mark ended the conversation like that. I think Mark probably didn't understand even half of what I said. If he had understood, he wouldn't have reacted like that. I tried to explain again, but Mark was no longer listening. "Don't try to enjoy working from home, just go get a part-time job somewhere." As I tried to start speaking, Mark turned a displeased face toward me. Mark somehow has the perception that he's the only one working. This won't do for a conversation. I decided in my heart not to talk about my side job until I can proudly tell Mark about the money I've earned. And so, I started a side job from home. Mark remains unchanged, not promoted, and always in the same department. It's rare for a public servant to be in the same department for over 3 years. It seems that he is thought to be unhelpful in other departments. Mark, who has been left behind while his peers are steadily being promoted, seems more stressed than ever, which I can tell. Firstly, the amount of alcohol he consumes at home has increased. Of course, the number of times he comes home drunk after drinking outside has also increased. Moreover, he always comes home completely drunk. And the next day, he would take the day off due to a hangover. This would surely affect his attendance record. On top of that, he didn't like me constantly on the computer even on my days off and had started going to the slot machines, something he had never done before. Sometimes he wins, but most of the time he loses. I once told Mark that it's a waste of money and suggested he find another hobby. Mark retorted, "What do you know?" before storming out. He returned late at night, thoroughly drunk. When I was called out to the front door in response to a loud call, the taxi driver was supporting Mark, who seemed unable to stand on his own due to his drunkenness. I dumped Mark in his room next to the entrance as he was. The taxi driver said apologetically, "I haven't received the fare yet." I planned to pay it from Mark's wallet, so I found his wallet and checked it. It was completely empty. He probably blew it all at the casino. In a hurry, I paid the taxi fare from my own wallet that I had left in the kitchen. I wonder what he would have done if I hadn't been home when he took a taxi home drunk and penniless. The next morning, Mark woke up with his usual hangover. He claimed to have no memory of the previous night. "You've been drinking too much lately. It's not good for your health, be careful." As I handed him a hangover remedy and water, Mark made a somewhat malicious expression. I braced myself for some sarcastic comment, but he said nothing. But I am certain that he harbors some dissatisfaction with my words deep down. Proof of that is that he has stopped making eye contact with me entirely. Despite it being a much-awaited weekend, Mark shuts himself in his bedroom due to his hangover. After finishing house chores, I sat down in front of my computer to do my work. Public servants have a 2-day weekend. I decided to be lenient and let him enjoy his heavy drinking on a Saturday. With these thoughts in mind, I start my work. At first, I was worried about Mark, but as I focused on my work, I completely forgot about him. Time flies when you're focused. Before I knew it, it was Sunday evening. Mark's hangover was severe, and he was unable to eat lunch. As night approaches, he seems to be somewhat back to his usual condition. I was focused on my work until Mark, who spent his day off lounging in bed, called out, "Dinner." "Huh? Is it that time already? I didn't notice because I was so focused." Startled by Mark's voice, I checked the clock on the wall. It was almost 7 p.m. "Hurry up, I'm hungry." Mark, leaning on the entrance door with his arms crossed, looked disgruntled. Indeed, I had completely forgotten about dinner, that was my mistake. Feeling sorry, I left my computer. I hadn't done any shopping, so I had to make dinner with what was left in the refrigerator. I prepared dinner in a hurry. While I was busily preparing dinner in the kitchen, Mark was sprawled out on the living room sofa, doing nothing. From time to time, he called out, "Isn't it ready yet?" "It'll be ready soon, sorry. Please wait a bit." "You're slow, hurry up. You're a stay-at-home wife, and you can't even do this right." As Mark continued to complain while lying around, I gradually became irritated. If he was so hungry, he could at least help a little. I felt my remorse gradually changing into resentment towards Mark. My movements as I prepared dinner became rougher. He must have heard the sounds in the living room. I heard a sharp tisk from the living room. Because of all this, the atmosphere at dinner was terrible. Watching Mark eat his meal in silence with a sullen face, I felt fed up. It must have shown on my face. Suddenly, Mark splashed the beer he was drinking at me. Caught off guard by the cold beer in my face, I was momentarily stunned. The beer was chilled and I certainly hadn't expected such an action from Mark. Beer was dripping from my chin. "If you have a problem living off my hard work, you parasite, then get a divorce and get out." His face, flushed red, probably from the alcohol, was shouting at me, still stunned. He kept grumbling even after his outburst. "A parasite? You think of me as a parasite?" I asked Mark, looking straight at him. It upset me more to be called a parasite than having beer thrown at me. I need him to correct those words and apologize no matter what. At my thoughts, Mark snorted in derision. Don't feel like you're working just because you do a little side job for pocket money. You're not working, you're spending all of my earnings and savings on infertility treatments, and even after all that, we don't have a child. You stopped the treatment because you were feeling unwell and remain a housewife. Mark began his usual rant about how much stress he's under from work. Indeed, being a public service clerk likely involved a lot of complaints. I empathize with that, but it was Mark who chose this job. He should simply do his job without constantly complaining about it. If we were both working, my hardships would have been less. I might have quit this job I hate. I'm working and enduring for your sake. Mark was blaming me for all the stress from his work. I was truly taken aback. I don't remember him being like this. Maybe his personality changed as he watched his peers climb up the career ladder. Seeing me listening silently, Mark smirked unpleasantly. He seemed to mistake my silence for my inability to argue back. Truthfully, I was just too astounded to speak. If you have complaints, then let's divorce. Mark repeated the word divorce again. Does he think that mentioning divorce will make me reflect on my actions and apologize? Understood. I replied calmly. I had nothing else to say to Mark. If he wants to make a fuss about divorce, then let's divorce. Determined, I wiped the beer off with a towel that was nearby. It was sticky and uncomfortable. I'll leave. I got up and opened the drawer where I keep my important belongings. In there was a divorce paper that we had written together as a precaution to stay close to each other when we first got married. I never thought we would have to use it. The divorce paper already has both of our signatures. We just need to fill in the date and submit it. Mark, remember this? The divorce paper we wrote when we first got married. It's a pity that we have to use it. I opened the divorce paper in front of Mark to show him. Mark seemed to have completely forgotten the existence of the divorce papers, his eyes wavering a bit in shock. My affection for him cooled immediately, making me think he wasn't really serious about the word divorce. I was so mad at myself for not seeing that he was such a small-minded man. I neatly folded the divorce papers and tucked them into my pocket. Hurry up and get a lawyer to process this. I'll feel refreshed once I get rid of this parasite. Get it over with quickly. I finished my dinner and left the dining table as it was. I returned to my room, quickly packing only what I needed into my bag. Mark was still drinking beer in the dining room, but I decided to leave the house without saying a word to him. Honestly, I didn't want to see Mark's face anymore. I boarded the train and returned to my parents' house. My parents' home is about an hour and a half away by train. My mother looked surprised to see me come home without any notice, but she seemed to sense something was wrong by my demeanor. I'm home. When I said that in a small voice, my mother warmly welcomed me with welcome back. Whether it was the relief from hearing my mother's voice, I don't know, but I ended up sitting down right at the front door. My father, wondering what was going on, also showed his face at the entrance. Seeing me sitting down at the entrance, he seemed to sense something was wrong as well. And so, I returned to the comfort of my parents' home. Once I had calmed down a bit, I told my parents what had happened tonight. My parents, who knew that I, who had been frail since I was a child, had been working hard on infertility treatments, were beyond angry and flabbergasted at Mark's lack of consideration. When I finally told them that I was called a parasite, my father slammed his teacup down on the table. The noise was so loud that both my mother and I were startled. Looking at me, my father said quietly, "Fight this through to the end." The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I went straight to the lawyer's office. My marriage to Mark will be over soon. After visiting the lawyer's office, on the way home, I passed by the town hall where my husband works. There was Mark. As I thought about our life as a married couple, there weren't many good memories. Thinking it couldn't be, I thought back to our newlywed life with Mark, but indeed, there were no wonderful memories. I was convinced in my mind that we divorced because we were meant to divorce. While Mark was at work, I returned to the house where we had been living together and quickly moved out my belongings. It would be impossible for me to do it alone, so I asked my father and brother to lend me a car. Thinking that some heavy lifting would be necessary, even my cousins who live nearby came to help. At this time, all the men in my family unanimously said, "We thought you would divorce." Even my brother had said he didn't like Mark from the time of the wedding. "Why didn't you oppose my marriage then?" I couldn't help but blurt it out. My father and brothers laughed out loud at my words. Apparently, they had opposed it, and I had just forgotten. Just like the saying love is blind, I was infatuated with Mark before our marriage. Opposing opinions probably didn't reach me. I felt a little embarrassed, realizing that memory is something that can be overwritten to suit one's convenience. After removing the necessary items, I wrote a letter to Mark. I left a note stating that my lawyer is processing the divorce, and that I had already moved out my belongings, so he could do as he pleased with the rest. I tried to think of something nice to add, but nothing came to mind. Finishing the letter brought me an incredible sense of relief, to the point where I was surprised at myself. The moment I locked the front door and threw the keys into the mailbox, I felt like dancing. I realized that my marriage to Mark had been a continual exercise in patience. I had braced myself for Mark's immediate contact, but there was none on the day I moved out, or the day after. Then, 3 days after I left the house, I spent the day shopping with my mother for the first time in a long while. It was partly a change of pace, but I also wanted to thank my mother who had accepted me back home without saying anything. As it was nearly Father's Day, I decided to pick out a gift for my father with her. After enjoying the shopping, we returned home a bit past 6 p.m. I had unintentionally left my cell phone at home, and I hurriedly checked it when I got back. There were a terrifying number of calls and emails from Mark. Among Mark's calls, there were also calls from a friend. He's probably asking around my friends for my whereabouts. I felt sorry for the trouble I had caused my friends. As I was wondering whether or not to contact Mark, my phone buzzed, notifying me of an incoming call. When I checked the screen, it was Mark calling. I knew I couldn't keep running away forever, so I decided to pick up. "Lisa, where are you? Things are really bad." The moment I answered the phone, Mark's yelling filled my ears. He sounded very frantic, and I couldn't make out the words he was blurting out. "Huh? What? I've already submitted the divorce papers. We're practically strangers now. I don't know what's so bad, but it doesn't concern me, does it?" I deliberately spoke slowly. I hoped that it would further irritate Mark. My provocation easily riled up Mark. "You just went and hired a lawyer on your own." He made it sound like I had done everything on my own, even though he was the one who had initiated the divorce. This really got on my nerves. "Hold on a minute, remember, you were the one who wanted a divorce, right, Mark? Feeling liberated now that the parasite is gone, are we? Oh, did you realize that maybe you're the parasite?" At my words, I could hear Mark catching his breath on the other end of the line. I had expected the call would come soon. "Did you think I didn't know about your debt?" Actually, Mark had a debt. It was a debt he had accumulated from gambling. It was about 5 years ago when I found out that he was deeply in debt from casino and boat racing. Mark's excuse was terrible. He seemed to think that since I was spending money on infertility treatments, he should be able to spend as well. I remember being confused when he told me that. In the end, we promised to repay this debt together. Mark, who had cried and promised never to gamble again, continued to do so, and I knew it. "Did you think you could repay your debt and live a normal life on just the living expenses you give me?" Mark was silent on the other end of the line. Mark used to hand over the living expenses from his salary to me, and he was free to use the rest as he wished. At first, he would give me the money to repay his debts separately from the living expenses, but eventually, the debt repayment money stopped being included in the living expenses envelope. He had fallen into gambling. "Let me guess, you've been borrowing money from your family to repay the debts, haven't you? Are you mooching off them too?" Mark spat out with as much sarcasm as he could muster. He seemed to think that I was borrowing money from my family to meet the monthly debt repayments. He even seemed to know that the money he was giving me wasn't enough to repay the debt. "I haven't borrowed a single penny from my family. I've been repaying your debts with the money I earned from my side job. But now that we are strangers, I don't have any obligation to repay your debts. Did you really think that you could live a normal life while repaying debts with your salary alone?" Mark must have called because he'd been contacted by his creditor. The money he borrowed wasn't from a particularly reputable source. He borrowed from banks, maxed out his credit cards, and ended up in debt to financial companies. There was some debt collection involved. It seems they contacted his workplace. He was panicking. "So, it's not me who is the parasite. You were my parasite, Mark. Stop lying. You can't possibly have made that much money from a woman's work-at-home job. Stop showing off. Just go borrow some money from your family and pay it back." Mark was always looking down on me. I couldn't help but sigh in disbelief. My side job is affiliate marketing. You could look it up on the internet. If you try a bit, you can easily out-earn your salary. I wonder why you didn't realize this when I was no longer dependent on you, especially since you are a public servant. The truth is, the side job I chose was quite profitable. I won't say that anyone can make money from it. How much you earn probably varies from person to person. But my strategy, based on the skills and experience I gained while working in a major corporation's marketing team, was a huge success. Well, that's how it is. I said that and hung up the phone. Mark tried to say something, but I didn't feel like listening to the end. It would probably be something like, pay for me, or I need a loan. Hanging up the phone made me feel like I'd really severed ties with Mark. He probably had other debts that I'd been repaying, and maybe even new ones he'd taken on. Well, it's none of my business anymore. After that, Mark kept calling me for several days. He seems to have come to my family home when I was out, but my father sent him away. At that time, he reportedly said, "I want you to lend me some money." Just how greedy can he be? To think I used the money I earned to repay his debts. It was ridiculous. He should have relied on his parents, but apparently, he'd already done so. He'd borrowed a large amount from his in-laws, and had been disowned without my knowledge. I did feel a distance growing between us and his parents at one point. Mark had told me that his brother and his wife had moved in with them, so they were keeping their distance to avoid being a nuisance, but that must have been a lie. Unable to rely on his own family, he kept borrowing money to repay his debts. I always figured he'd eventually go bankrupt, but it came about surprisingly soon. In the end, he seems to have borrowed money from loan sharks, and even the city hall was hit by debt collectors. There were also harassing phone calls that caused the city hall's phone lines to go crazy, causing a big problem. Eventually, rumors spread, and Mark lost his place at work and resigned. I heard rumors that he is now unemployed and on the run from debt collectors. He has become less than a parasite now, more like scum. Having moved back to my family home, I decided to stay there. We're renovating the slightly old family home, and my mother is putting her heart into creating an English garden she's always longed for. My affiliate marketing is going well, and I'm not short of money. Most of all, I'm happy that I can spend the money I've earned on my own. Once the English garden is complete, I'm thinking of opening a cafe. Sorry to bother you as always. I'll be counting on you again this time. Mia, sporting a cheeky smile as she said this, seemed to feel no guilt for making us foot the bill. She took for granted that she could join our trips and use Rick like a personal ATM, leading me to sigh for what must have been the umpteenth time. Oh, by the way, this time Mia's parents are also coming along. Thrown off by this unexpected change of plans, I was caught off guard. Of course, Mia had no intention of paying for her parents' travel expenses. Rick, trying to maintain his generosity in front of Mia, wouldn't dare to ask her to chip in. I knew for a fact that he would come back to me later, asking me to pay half. Despite the surprise, I was secretly pleased with the unexpected turn of events. I glance at the excited Rick and chuckle under my breath. Yes, that's fine. It'll be the last time anyway. Last time? I nodded, giving a broad smile. The two of them looked surprised for a moment, but soon burst out laughing. Right, sure, they chuckled, thinking my words were just a joke and not taking them seriously. They resumed their friendly chat. Seeing the two of them so carried away, I didn't even respond. In my bag, I gently caressed a certain tool, eagerly awaiting the moment of my revenge. My name is Mary. I'm turning 63 this year. We used to love traveling. From an early age, we would arrange our work schedules a few times a year to enjoy domestic trips. This didn't change after we had children or even after retirement. I thought we would continue to enjoy our hobby in this way. Everything changed when Mia, the wife of our eldest son, started visiting our house. After our eldest son, Max, got married, Mia started visiting our home quite often. Even busy with work, Max seemed to feel relieved knowing that Mia was visiting her in-laws' house. So, I didn't say anything. We were happy to have Mia, who was young enough to be our own daughter, coming to visit us out of affection. However, what began to bother me was the attitude of my husband, Rick, towards Mia. Thank you so much for always treating me to dinner. It's okay. It's worth cooking when you visit. Right. She only has cooking as a hobby. That's why she's really happy when Mia visits. When Rick talked with Mia, he often started to belittle me. He constantly compared me with Mia, who is young enough to be my daughter. Mia has beautiful skin, or you should learn from Mia's sense of beauty. He would take any opportunity to praise Mia and put me down. Sure, Mia always came to our house with a beautiful hairstyle and dressed up. However, it's troubling for both Mia and me to be compared with someone who has a generation gap as big as a parent and child. I tried to correct Rick, who kept on talking excitedly, alcohol included. Could you stop it? You're making Mia uncomfortable, aren't you? What's wrong with saying the truth? Are you jealous of a beautiful girl? Of course not. What are you saying? Then don't complain. Sorry, Mia. My wife isn't as young as you, so she gets irritated easily. With a smug smile, Rick shrugged it off, and I sighed in frustration. Perhaps because we didn't have a daughter, Rick was overjoyed when a cute woman like Mia became our son's wife. But recently, Rick's behavior seems to have gone too far. Not only does he belittle me, but he's constantly doting on Mia, visibly enthralled by her. I thought it was some kind of joke, but I haven't forgotten the careless words that an emboldened Rick let slip. You are always so kind to me. I appreciate it. Yeah? Well, I bet I'm a better man than Max. Hey, what are you saying? Max has always been coward. Unlike him, I could protect Mia. Rick was implying to Mia that he was a better man than Max. The thought of him saying such things to Mia, my daughter-in-law, made me feel repulsed. I hear you two often go on trips. I heard it from Max. Yes, it's been a hobby of ours for a long time. I envy you. Max has been so busy with work, we haven't gone on a trip in forever. Mia kept a bright smile on her face and turned her gaze toward Rick. I felt a chill at her expression, anticipating Rick's next words. Really? How about joining us on our next trip? Are you sure? I feel a little bad. Rick brightened his expression and said this to Mia while grinning. He didn't seem to care about my opinion at all. Mia, too, showed no sign of holding back, even as she said she felt bad. She glanced at me, cupping her cheeks with both hands. But I don't have any money to spend freely. Don't worry, we invited you, so we'll cover it. Right? Oh, yes, I guess. When Rick looked to me for agreement, Mia took Rick's hand with a triumphant smile, expressing her gratitude. Perhaps it was my imagination, but Mia was indeed smiling at me with a narrowed, contented gaze. We're planning to head out at the beginning of next month, so be ready. Yes. Got it, thank you. In the end, the two of them were getting excited without even considering me. All I could do was watch with a cold gaze. So what are we going to do? We haven't reserved a hotel room for Mia. Well, we'll have to do it now, won't we? Please take care of it. Why should I have to do it, when you were the one who happily invited her? Why are you being so cold, knowing Mia is coming? After Mia left, when I informed Rick that we had only made reservations for two, he said something absurd. Despite his pompous demand of be kind to Mia, Rick didn't lift a finger to make the hotel reservations or even secure the theater tickets we had planned on. What's more, he even hesitated to cover the costs, despite his grand boasts. Yet, despite his attitude, he made the creepy joke of, if need be, Mia can sleep in my room, which left me at my wit's end. This discomfort, naturally, continued during the trip. Even during the trip, Rick never stopped trying to appease Mia. After Mia expressed disinterest in the theater, I ended up wasting the tickets I had prepared and had to change our plans. It was quite frustrating. I was frustrated with Rick, who, without reproaching Mia, wooed her while being lovey-dovey. Listen, Mia. We appreciate you coming with us, but it's a problem if you mess up our travel schedule. Oops. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Your husband is so kind, I just got spoiled. That's fine. I'm happy when you rely on me. No matter how much I conveyed, Mia would wink at Rick, and a peculiar pattern where Rick would rebuke me in turn was established. Mia, clearly understanding that Rick was on her side, was often seen making manipulative comments. And whatever I said, Rick would only brazenly retort, "What's wrong with pampering my daughter? I'm sorry, I'm always the one having fun. Really, I must be a nuisance, right? Not at all. I'm really enjoying having Mia with us. My wife is the one who is more of a nuisance, always complaining." Do you really mean that? Once Mia tasted the good life, she started coming to our house just in time for our trips and naturally started accompanying us. Perhaps Rick had been inviting Mia in advance, knowing that he was going to travel. I was not informed about any of this. Despite that, the extra travel expenses due to Mia were mostly left to me. During the trip, Mia always left the payments to Rick, never even attempting to open her wallet. In fact, she didn't even bring a wallet. This is so cute. I want it as a souvenir. That's okay, I'll pay for it. Let's go buy it. Really? Thank you. The additional expenses for Mia kept increasing because Rick, wanting to please her, would readily jump in to pay. And always afterwards, Rick would concoct some strange reasoning like, "I'm just responding to Mia's requests," and resist even more when handing over the money to me. The trip, which was supposed to be enjoyable, became nothing but additional expenses. Nothing went as planned, and I grew increasingly disgusted. Such trips continued time and again, causing my irritation to intensify. Since talking to the two of them did not solve anything, I decided to complain directly to Max about Mia. However, the response that came back from Max was beyond my expectations and was extremely harsh. "Hey Max, Mia has been tagging along on our trips forever. Can't something be done about this?" I said. "Well, I've heard that Dad is happily inviting Mia on these trips, you know?" Max replied. "The problem is that they decide everything on their own. And they won't pay a dime." Oh? Wait a minute. Isn't that strange? I've heard that Mia actually pays for her own expenses, right? From what I could tell, Max seemed to have been fed a distorted story by Mia. He seemed to completely believe the tale that Mia was paying for her own expenses because my husband Rick was insistently inviting her on these trips. Of course, I hadn't received a single penny from Mia, and given Rick's personality, I doubted he had either. And yet, Max seemed to think I was making up this story to spite Mia. That's absurd. If that's what you think, she doesn't have to come anymore. Mia is trying to get along with you guys, you know. You don't have to talk like that, right? Why should I get along with someone who fabricates lies and makes others out to be the bad guys? I tried to explain the truth to Max, but I didn't have any concrete proof that Mia wasn't paying for the trips. Max seemed to be in a dilemma over whom to trust, me or Mia. Later, Max apparently talked to Mia again, who stuck to her story that she was paying her fair share. In fact, she complained to Max that it was unfair for me to claim she wasn't paying when she was, and that she felt unliked. Overwhelmed by her tearful appeal, Max sighed over the phone, seemingly taking Mia's side. At Max's doubt, I was at my wit's end. Mia never takes out her wallet when she comes on these trips. She always says she has no disposable income because she's not working. But she's been telling me that she's paying, Max defended. In that case, isn't she traveling on your earnings? If she really is paying, calculate exactly how much she's put in. In the face of such hostile circumstances, I found myself snapping at Max. I had reached my limit with Mia, who was making me look bad with her petty behavior, and Rick, who was consistently falling for it. In order to obtain evidence to convince Max, I decided to take revenge on the two. Then, on the next trip, Mia came along as always. Her small branded bag seemed to hold little more than a handkerchief and her smartphone, with no signs of a wallet, of course. "Sorry for always being a bother. I appreciate your help this time too." As she said this with a smirk, she seemed to feel neither guilt nor anything else about making others pay for her. As usual, Mia climbed into the passenger seat of Rick's car and flashed him a friendly smile. Rick responded to Mia's behavior with a lax face. Seeing the two of them, I sighed again. I might have usually tolerated it all. But not this time. Coughing slightly in the back seat, I glared at the two I was planning to push into hell. About today's trip plan, how about this place? I've always wanted to visit there. Oh, great. I'll take you everywhere you want to go, Mia. I'm so happy. Thank you. Despite not bringing a single penny herself, Mia seemed fully prepared in terms of where she wanted to go and started proposing ideas in front of me, completely ignoring the previously agreed plan. With her smartphone, she kept telling Rick, "I want this. I want to go here." Like always, I didn't pay much attention and instead, checked the preparations for my revenge. Suddenly, Rick turned to look at me as if he had just remembered something and blurted out the most outrageous thing. "Oh right, Mia's parents are joining us this time too." "Excuse me?" "I told my parents about our trips and they got jealous. I thought I'd invite Mia's parents this time since it's a special occasion. Of course, I'm going to cover all the costs so Mia doesn't need to worry about anything." He informed Mia with a grin and gave me a sidelong glance. Caught off guard by the sudden change in plans, I was speechless. Regarding Mia's parents' expenses, of course, she probably has no intention of paying, and Rick is just pretending to be generous in front of Mia right now. He probably has no real intention of paying either. He'd most likely tell me to pay half once we got back home. Surprised and annoyed by this unexpected development, I had to suppress a chuckle. "Really? That's convenient." Upon hearing my response, Rick looked at me with a sly smile. "Right? Right?" He was in such a good mood that he even started humming as he resumed driving. Perhaps he misunderstood that he could now curry favor with Mia's parents with his wife's approval. Or he may have thought that since I said it was convenient, I'd generously foot the bill. I glance at the excited Rick and chuckle under my breath. "Thank you so much." "No problem. This is the last time, anyway." "Huh? The last time?" With a broad smile, I responded to her. Both of them looked at me in surprise for a moment but then began laughing. "You're joking, right?" They seemed to think I was kidding and didn't take me seriously. "Mia is like our own daughter, of course. We'll keep going on trips together, right?" "Of course. So please keep taking care of me." Ignoring the overconfident duo, I maintained my smile without saying a word. Even the unexpected events that Rick hadn't informed me about were bearable, thinking that the two of them were about to experience hell. When we arrived at the hotel in the evening, we met up with Mia's parents and were all led to our rooms. As usual, Mia and Rick both announced that they were going to rest in the room. Of course, these two were in separate rooms, but I knew exactly what they were up to when they said this. So, I intentionally said to them, "I think I'll have a drink with Mia's parents, since it's a special occasion." "Sure, take your time." Creating a situation where they could be alone, they cheerfully said take your time, and Mia even waved at me with a grin. The way they seemed more at ease without me around confirmed my suspicions. Anticipating that they would let their guard down, I approached Mia's parents. "There's something I'd like you to see, is that okay?" As they looked at me quizzically, I quietly launched an app on my smartphone and began to play a video. "Wow! What a nice room! Your room is nice too." "Really? Then you can come to this room too, right?" The video I started to show them was streaming from a camera I had set up in the room earlier. This was the room where Rick and I were staying, and Mia had just walked in as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Mia's parents watched with puzzled faces as they took in the sight of their daughter and Rick, who were quite familiar with each other. "It's like I'm preparing the hotel and the trip for Mia. Heck, we could even go on a trip just the two of us, without my wife. That would be too pitiful for your wife. But she is really mad that I'm not paying. Don't worry about it, Mia. I'll give her a piece of my mind." The screen was continuously displaying the exchange between a fawning Mia and a pleased Rick. The interaction between the two, unthinkable for a father-in-law and daughter-in-law, was heating up. They seemed to be having fun at my expense. As Alice, Mia's mother, saw her own daughter comfortably hurling outrageous insults at me, she turned pale and looked at me. What on earth? What is my daughter doing? This footage is being streamed from a camera we left in my and my husband's room. It seems your daughter is currently talking to my husband in our room. I thought this trip was because Mia wanted to express her gratitude to us. Oh, really? I was only informed today that both of you were coming. Seems she decided on her own again. I revealed everything about the trip and other things to the two of them, without hiding anything. The fact that Mia wasn't contributing financially at all, Rick's attitude, and the fact that the two were neglecting me. As I explained, the two confessed as if through the camera. Because of this, the complexion of the two who had been watching next to me changed hectically, turning red and pale. Throughout this, I was quietly recording while watching the various words of Rick, who was smirking, and his words to his daughter-in-law that didn't seem like lines. My daughter has done something terrible. I truly don't know how to apologize. I appreciate your understanding. I intend to sever ties with these two after this. Looking at the two who were downcast and speechless, I thought it would be cruel to torment them anymore, and when the time was right, I headed for the room. I forcefully opened the door of the two's room, thinking that it was about time to reveal the truth. Whoa, Mary! What the heck, all of a sudden? What? Is there something inconvenient about me returning to my own room? I didn't say that. Don't just barge in, you'll scare us. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were jumpy because you had something to hide. As I said that, I replayed the footage from earlier in front of the two. Seeing their parents' faces behind me, the two became flustered, and I sighed at their ridiculousness. Did you want to come on a trip by yourselves? Were Mia's parents and I in the way? Well, that's... Mia, I heard from your parents that if you invite them on a trip to express gratitude, you should at least pay for it yourself. No, that's not it. That's not it. It's because he said he would give me money. Mia, who was desperately trying to defend herself, kept making excuses, and Rick, who was blustering about the camera I had prepared in secret. Seeing the two who couldn't even apologize at this point, I felt my heart growing colder. Is what she's saying true? Max. The person who appeared at the perfect timing was Max, who had been away on a business trip. Mia was surprised by the unexpected guest, and her face turned pale as she gasped. Of course, I had called Max ahead of time for this occasion. Noticing the discrepancy between the amount in the household account and the travel expenses, Max, who had finally felt something was off, was no longer likely to side with Mia. Mia, were you lying? It's not like that. It's because your dad said I didn't have to pay. I just took advantage of that, please believe me. Oh, really? You've been making me pay because you said you were short of money because of Mia. I operated my smartphone and replayed another video at full volume. It was a pathetic conversation where Rick was reluctant to pay for the trip. Because I feel sorry for Mia, I'll cover her expenses, and you also wanted to go on this trip, so you should pay for it, echoed Rick's nonsensical remarks throughout the room. This guy, he's so broke that he has to make me pay. What? He's the worst. I was trying to be a good daughter-in-law because I thought he had money. At Rick's lowly remarks emanating from the smartphone, Mia's true nature finally emerged. The person who sternly condemned Mia, who was wide-eyed and trying to insult Rick, was Mia's mother, Alice, who had been listening quietly in the background. Who's the real lowlife here? I'm so embarrassed as a parent. Alice, with a red face, severely reprimanded Mia. So much so that neither Max nor I had a chance to intervene. You are no longer my daughter. I shouldn't have believed that you were offering this trip as a gift. I didn't mean it like that. This is so unfair. As Mia's voice echoed through the room, I instinctively reprimanded Alice. Seeing this, Rick quietly came over to me and finally offered an apology, saying, "Sorry for trying to look good in front of my son's wife." However, I was fed up with Rick's attitude, which seemed to imply that he expected forgiveness because he had apologized. When we came here, I said it would be the last time. I don't need a husband who fawns over his son's wife anymore. What? Why? I'm apologizing, aren't I? Do you think an apology will suffice? You're such a disappointment. With that, I expressed my desire for a divorce. It was then that Rick finally realized the irreversible mistake he had made. He knelt down on the spot and drooped. After the disastrous trip, Max also apologized when he learned the truth. The cost of Mia's trip, which I had covered, would be repaid by Mia, who seemed to have been affected by her parents' admonishment. Mia decided to work part-time, without any help from Max. In addition to the trip, I heard that the branded bags and accessories that Rick had been fervently gifting were confiscated. Rick has been going around telling people, I ended up divorcing because I was being milked by Mia. It seems like he's causing more trouble in that regard as well. I heard that he even went to Mia's place demanding her to repay the money he had spent on her. It caused quite a commotion. Was Dad always like this? I only remember him and Mom getting along well. I wonder. In retrospect, he seems to have just been a lazy man with whom I shared a common interest in travel. Max was disappointed in Rick, who lacked any sense of authority as a father. He vented his frustrations to me about Rick's behavior. However, from my perspective, the story only reinforced that it was a good thing we had divorced. Because Rick had spoiled Mia so much, he had almost no money left. I successfully divorced him and now live comfortably by myself, having kicked him out. Now, I'm planning a trip to wherever I want to go, undisturbed and making up for all the times I had been made to endure in the past. Well, this makes it clear, doesn't it? The entire inheritance goes to your brother. The will is genuine, so stop your doubting. What? Is it really okay for us to take all this money? My husband, looking down on me, and the elated sister-in-law. The $100 million inheritance from father will be inherited entirely by my brother. I stare at the will stating this with a sense of utter despair. Have I lost everything and am stuck with this despicable man for the rest of my life? But with one sentence from my brother, everything turns upside down. My name is Catherine. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. I have no children with my husband, Robert, and we live as a couple. Robert is, in a word, a typical chauvinist. Since the beginning of our marriage, Robert's commands were absolute, and I could neither defy him nor express my opinion. My husband, 10 years older than me, has no consideration for me at all. I serve Robert like a slave, desperately doing household chores, and if there's something he doesn't like, he doesn't hesitate to verbally abuse me. Being unable to have children was also blamed on me, and I cried in secret almost every day. I wanted to divorce, but I didn't want to worry my relatives, and I didn't have the financial strength to become independent. I've been enduring and staying strong under my arrogant husband, who has a knack for psychological abuse. My only emotional support was my father. My father was once a capable businessman. He built a company from scratch and developed it into a major corporation. Although he was a workaholic, he loved my brother and me in his own way. Shortly after I got married, my mother passed away in a car accident, and my father immersed himself more in work as if to distract himself from the loneliness. It seems the overwork took its toll. My father had a stroke and was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, his life was not in danger, but he was left paralyzed on the left side. The price for working so recklessly was a massive inheritance. I persuaded my father to retire. I was worried about my father living alone, so I managed to persuade my husband, and we moved into my father's house. Once a workaholic, my father seemed to age rapidly upon retirement, showing signs of dementia, and in no time, he was bedridden and in need of nursing care. My physical and mental burdens increased dramatically. In addition to everyday housekeeping and taking care of Robert, I now had to take care of my father with dementia. Sometimes my father would lay quietly, but other times he would shout and thrash around in the middle of the night, or he would wander out of the house. I was constantly exhausted due to lack of sleep, stress, and endless hard work. Although my father was often dazed, there were times when he was clear-minded. At such times, we could have a peaceful conversation like the old times. My father often thanked me and smiled sadly, saying, "I want to leave you with as much as I can." My father passed away. This happened 3 years after I started taking care of him. Although I was relieved from the burden of care, the loss of my father, my only emotional support, left me with an enormous sense of loss and loneliness. My only hope was my father's inheritance. An inheritance of $100 million, even if split in half with my brother, would be $50 million. With that amount of money, I could finally break free from my devil-like husband. It was my only remaining hope in life. Then, a few days later, I was called by Robert and our eldest son's wife, Naomi, to discuss the inheritance. Naomi's husband, that is, my brother, has been working overseas for several years. He had returned home for the funeral but had just returned to his assignment yesterday. In place of my brother, his wife Naomi would also be present.
Your dad's will was found in the back of the drawer. It's good that it was ready for us and it wasn't sealed, so let's take a look right away.
A will? I didn't know there was such a thing. I was providing care every day, but I never saw him writing a will. I wondered why my husband, who hardly cared for my father, knew about it. I had an uneasy feeling and a bad premonition.
Let's read it. All of my assets will be inherited by my eldest son, Ken. Dated April 1st, John Smith. That's it.
I couldn't believe my ears. I had always thought that my father's estate would be equally divided between my brother and me. I couldn't believe that all of my father's $100 million estate would be inherited only by my brother.
Whoa, wait a minute. That's strange. Why would that be?
My husband handed me the will and told me to see for myself as I panicked. Indeed, it was written on the will, along with my father's signature. I immediately suspected that the will was forged. My father had a good relationship with both my brother and me, and he wasn't the type to favor only one of us. But would my kind and straightforward brother really hoard the inheritance all to himself? As I was deep in thought, my brother's wife burst into laughter.
Wow. We get to keep all of his money? That feels kind of wrong. But if that's his wish, we have to respect it, right?
I absolutely couldn't accept this. As I silently held the will, both my husband and my brother's wife glared at me.
Hey, are you doubting this? If so, you can bring in a handwriting expert or something. Just because it's inconvenient for you doesn't mean you can go doubting it. You really have a bad attitude. I'll do that.
I murmured, deciding to get the will appraised. However, contrary to my expectations, the results were that it was unquestionably written by the testator himself. I was disappointed at the shocking results and fell into despair, thinking about the past. I had devoted my life to taking care of my husband and my father. Living in fear of my husband's anger, being hurt by his verbal abuse, and being called a worthless woman was painful, but my last days with my father were happy. Even though I believed that my father cared for me too. It was more shocking and unbearable for me to think that my beloved father didn't care about me than not receiving the inheritance. I probably have to leave this familiar house and land, because they are part of my father's real estate inheritance. My dream of divorcing my husband is also now back to square one. When I told my husband about the appraisal result of the will at home over the weekend, he sneered at me with a self-righteous face.
That settles it, all the inheritance goes to your brother. Don't go meddling in things anymore. The will was real. Always doubting, you worthless wife.
He left the house after throwing those words. Speaking of which, my husband has been away from home a lot lately. He's been coming home from work very late, and he's often not home on weekends like this. I found it suspicious, but I didn't want to see my husband as much as possible, so I was actually relieved. Despite my husband's objections, I wanted to talk to my brother directly about the inheritance. My brother, who worked overseas, was always busy, but he was a kind and reliable person. I made sure in advance that my brother wasn't too busy, and then I gave him a call. After some brief greetings, my brother again apologized for leaving the care of our father entirely to me and thanked me for handling the funeral and various procedures.
Don't worry about it. By the way, Robert, about Dad's inheritance. Was it always decided that you would be the sole heir?
I tried to ask casually. It was unbearable to think that maybe I wasn't loved by my father, but I wanted to talk about it properly.
Huh? What do you mean? All of the inheritance goes to me?
My brother sounded surprised. I thought Naomi had told him, but it seems he was hearing about it for the first time. But the will was genuine, so the result wouldn't change. I told my brother about what happened.
I see. The handwriting on the will is Dad's, and that was all it said, huh? Understood. I'll need some time to think. I'll get back to you. I'll tell Naomi not to proceed with anything until she hears from me.
My brother said, ending the call. Intrigued yet patient, I waited for my brother's call. Days later, my brother contacted me. My brother had requested that I look into Naomi's suspicious activities by hiring a private investigator. He also advised me to claim my legitimate share from him. The legitimate share refers to the minimum portion of an inheritance that is guaranteed to an inheritor, and the amount varies based on your position in the family. In my case, I can claim from my father's $25 million inheritance. Even with his will stating, all the inheritance should go to my brother, this legal provision would still allow me to inherit the $25 million. However, this did not sit well with my husband and my brother's wife.
The decision has already been made. Don't mess it up now, they protested.
However, there was more to my brother's advice.
I'm not asking for the $25 million. All I want is this house, filled with memories of our father, and the land. The total estate is worth $100 million, but the real estate property is only worth $10 million. I'll cede all the rest of the inheritance to my brother.
Still, the two of them continued to argue, so I continued. If this continues to escalate, I have been instructed by my brother to hire a lawyer to join the discussion. If it comes to that, I'm sure I'll inherit $25 million exactly. My husband and Naomi fell silent. Eventually, it seemed the two decided it was more profitable to settle for the $10 million worth of real estate. We finally agreed on the division of the inheritance. A few days later, I received the results of an investigation I had requested from a private investigator about Naomi. I immediately contacted my brother. After many twists and turns, the process of inheriting our father's estate was successfully completed. During the process, my brother Ken, from abroad, rushed to help. I inherited the family home and land, which was worth $10 million. My brother inherited the rest of the estate, which amounted to $90 million. Naomi and my husband were both in a good mood, with things progressing as they had hoped. After completing the inheritance proceedings, the four of us left the law office and returned to our father's house. While having a cup of tea in the living room, my brother began to speak, placing his smartphone on the table.
Well done, everyone. Now that we've successfully inherited Dad's estate, there's something I want to talk about,
he said with a smile. With that, he pulled a document from his pocket and spread it out on the table. The faces of my husband and Naomi turned pale upon reading the content. "It's a will" was the title written on the document. At the end of it was my father's signature and stamp. The date was about 5 years ago.
This is a will that Dad entrusted to me when he was still working. It was created with 2 witnesses at a notary office. It's a legally valid will, my brother informed us.
According to him, our father had drafted it before he had a stroke. His wife had already passed away, and in the event that something happened to him, he wanted to ensure his children would be properly provided for. The content of the will indicated that 1/4 of the total estate was to be left to Ken, who already had significant wealth, and 3/4 to Catherine, housewife. My father had made clear his intention not to change this will, and had explicitly stated in the will. If there's any change to this will, the reason for the change must be stated. Any will that does not include a reason for change is considered null and void.
My father was really pushing himself at work. I think he was considering all sorts of things, like what would happen if he fell gravely ill or became senile. The estate was enormous, so he prepared early to prevent any conflicts among the remaining family members,
my brother said, caressing the will. The will contained an addendum, stating, "I hope that there will be no conflicts over the inheritance and that the family will continue to live happily together." It was a will filled with my father's warm wishes for his family. I was touched to know that I was loved by my father just as much as my brother, and my heart swelled. On the other hand, my husband and Naomi next to me turned pale.
So, if you're going to change this will, the reason has to be stated, or else it's all null and void. Even if it's in my dad's handwriting. Maybe he was forced to write it when he was in a delirious state due to dementia.
Suddenly, my husband slammed the table. With a ferocious expression, he glared at my brother and growled.
Hey, Ken, do you have any proof? Calling me a criminal. I never said you forged the will, did I, Robert?
He then looked at his wife, Naomi, sitting next to him. Naomi remained silent.
I found it strange. Naomi informed me that my father had passed away and I was in the States for the funeral. After I returned abroad, apparently the topic of inheritance came up. But even though it concerned me, I wasn't informed of anything about it, my brother mentioned.
He was looking at his wife, Naomi. Naomi still said nothing.
Quit your yapping. The inheritance is all settled, the $90 million is ours. It doesn't matter what you say now. What do you mean by ours? The one who inherited is me, my brother countered calmly. Shut up, my husband shouted back.
The conversation was getting nowhere.
I'm not sure what you mean, but the $90 million I inherited are just worthless paper, my brother said calmly. What? My husband retorted, surprised.
My brother explained patiently. Our father's estate was worth $100 million. All of the assets, apart from real estate, were stocks in our father's own company. Back when my father was running the company, everything was smooth sailing and the stocks were soaring. But after he stepped down, the company continued to run in the red, and it seemed to be on the verge of bankruptcy in the 3 years before he passed away. The stocks that once had a value exceeding $90 million was now virtually worthless pieces of paper.
But that can't be possible, can it? It's the truth. I inherited knowing that. I plan on restructuring my father's company, and since it had nothing to do with you, I didn't bother telling you.
My husband seems rattled and mumbles to himself. He can't seem to come to terms with reality. It was then that Naomi spoke up for the first time.
Hang on, just wait a minute. What do you mean by that? So you're saying I unknowingly inherited trash, while Catherine alone inherited $10 million? That's not fair. That's unfair.
Beside the screaming Naomi, my brother sighed.
Naomi, I inherited my father's estate. You weren't disadvantaged in any way. Is there any reason for you to be this angry? But I thought we were going to get all of that $100 million. I planned for so many things.
Robert, my husband, glared sharply at the flustered Naomi.
So you conspired with Robert, thinking you were going to get all of my father's money. And while you were at it, you were having an affair, weren't you?
Naomi and her husband fell silent as if frozen in place.
Why?
Naomi muttered in a raspy voice. Glancing at her, my brother continued. After our phone call, my brother started to suspect Naomi. Why didn't she talk to me about the inheritance? Why had her interactions with me been so curt lately, and why had she started ignoring my calls? I had my suspicions, and after seeing her post on social media, I was certain she was having an affair.
Pretty soon, I'm going to come into a lot of money. I'll be living the life of a celebrity. I've been talking it over with my babe about how to spend it. He told me we're going to have so much fun once the money comes in. I'm so happy. I don't remember having that conversation with you, Naomi. I wonder who this babe of yours might be. No. You got it all wrong. This isn't.
Ignoring his flustered wife, my brother pulled out a large envelope. He took out several photos from the envelope and lined them up next to the will. They were pictures of Naomi and Robert going into a hotel with their arms entwined. The close relationship between the two was clear. I've been abroad, you know. I hired a private detective to investigate because I was curious about your babe. Presented with undeniable evidence, Naomi started to shake. Looking at Naomi's affair partner, my husband, I saw that he was boiling red with anger, a stark contrast to the pale Naomi.
Damn you, snooping around like a stalker. What the hell is all this? With your ridiculous will and these photos. What a joke. Stop!
Suddenly, Naomi raised her voice. She approached my brother in a seductive voice, like a bad actress.
Hey, you're wrong, it's all a misunderstanding. It's all Robert's doing. He convinced me that if I listened to him, I'd get all of your dad's inheritance. Hey, wouldn't you be happy to receive $100 million? I thought it was for your benefit.
My husband, who had been easily betrayed, stared at Naomi with his mouth wide open.
This picture, we were just messing around. You were always overseas, and I was lonely. You're also to blame, aren't you? Hey, forgive me. The $90 million is no good anymore, but let's take the $10 million from Catherine's real estate. Did you forge the will? Huh? Of course not. Robert did it. He said it was easy and had it written by your father. See, I'm not at fault.
When the matter of the forged will was revealed, my husband flew into a rage and lunged at Naomi, but my brother quickly intervened.
You bastards. You don't have any evidence. You all will regret this in hell. As he ranted and kicked a chair, my brother coolly watched and slowly took out his phone. Oh, it seems my phone was on record mode. It's been recording everything since we came home. That was a careless mistake. The husband and Naomi turned pale and fell silent. Also, I didn't mention it, but this room has surveillance cameras that record everything. I installed them because of Dad's severe dementia, just in case something happened to him. What a coincidence.
In the silent living room, only my brother kept talking.
Falsifying a will is a crime. Your earlier outburst at us could be considered a threat, punishable by law. There's a police station nearby, and they would be here quickly if we report it. But then again, since the inheritance issue has been settled and if you swear not to touch Catherine's stuff in the future, maybe there's no need to report. What do you think?
As he said this, my brother started operating his phone. I might as well send this voice recording to my computer overseas. Having been silently observing the exchange until now, I pulled out a document from my bag and thrust it at my husband.
Robert, I want a divorce. Whoa, hold on, reconsider this. I'm sorry. We've been together for years, haven't we? Who do you think has been providing for you all this time? I've had enough. Stop with the excuses and just agree to the divorce. If not, I'm calling the police.
I clenched my smartphone with a look of grim determination. Robert drooped his shoulders and nodded.
Naomi. Our relationship is over. Once I received the money, you were planning to take it and be with Ken, weren't you? I heard the records of your exchanges with Ken from a private investigator.
Naomi hung her head, covering her face with her hands. Afterwards, both my brother and I got divorced. Following the divorce, Robert left the house. The inheritance that he thought he'd acquired was not only worthless, but Naomi also spilled the beans about the forgery of the will. Everything that happened in the living room was also fully recorded. Robert must have been livid, but there was nothing he could do about it. The surveillance camera in the living room was originally installed for my father's care, but it also served the purpose of collecting evidence of Robert's emotional abuse. Even if I acquired my father's inheritance, I was planning to submit it as evidence in a divorce trial if Robert refused to divorce. When I told my brother about this, he suggested we use that camera as well. After the divorce, Robert lost his job due to rumors of his affair spreading in the workplace. It seems his colleagues had spotted him going in and out of hotels with a woman who was not his wife. Robert's parents had already passed away, and with the loss of his job and home, he disappeared. I had been requesting a share of his assets, but I didn't want to be involved with Robert anymore, especially after having inherited some wealth. Naomi, the woman Robert cheated with, also lost everything just like him. She had been insisting, "I don't want to break up. Don't leave me," during the divorce proceedings with my brother Ken, but the divorce was finalized when solid evidence was presented at the mediation. Naomi had been splurging money while Robert was not around, and she was billed for all of it, leaving her penniless. Since she had not been working from the start, and like Robert, didn't have a home to return to, she's now scraping by in a dilapidated public housing project, living off welfare. My brother Ken is still working overseas, but he has put up the house where he lived with Naomi for sale, and he will be moving in with me in the house that our father left us. I've always lived frugally, but my life has become stable since my brother started contributing to the living expenses. The value of the land my father left me has been increasing year by year, and now it's easily worth over $100 million. I've been freed from caring for my dad and from the emotional abuse from my husband, and now I'm living a relaxed life. With time to myself and now living alone in a large house, I started to think about how I could utilize it. Around that time, I saw a TV program about foreign exchange students doing homestays, and I thought, that's it. I decided to start a room rental service in my spare rooms. I'm offering rooms at a low cost to college students and exchange students, and now I live a lively life with them. We all eat meals together, play games, and help each other with assignments. We live together happily, almost like a family. On other days when I have some free time, I also do activities like reading storybooks at the local public library. I don't have any children of my own, and my husband and I had grown apart. After losing my beloved father, I was always worried about how lonely I would be, but now my days are unbelievably lively and vibrant. Even at my age, it's so rewarding to connect with young people and make even a small contribution to society. There have been many things in my life that were so hard, I wanted to run away. But now, I'm loosely connected with my brother, my roommates, and people in my community, and I'm living fulfilling days. Every day, I savor the modest happiness I've finally achieved. On the other end of the video call, my little sister, dressed in a dazzling outfit, was grinning widely.
Oh, sis, congrats on your wedding. What are you up to over there? Me? I'm just changing the dress.
She said this as she showed her entire outfit on screen on the phone. She was wearing the exact same colored dress I had chosen.
I was curious what a wedding without any relatives would feel like. I'd love to see it.
While acting innocently, my sister was subtly trying to one-up me.
Sure.
Upon seeing the screen, my sister exclaimed, "What?
What on earth is happening over there at your venue?"
My name is Nancy. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I'm getting married to my boyfriend, Paul, who is a year older than me. We both share a hobby, watching professional baseball. We met at a baseball stadium, and he proposed to me on the way home from watching a game. We were in a situation similar to going into the 7th inning stretch without allowing a run, despite having runners on base. However, the enemy's 7th inning was unexpected. Enemy? That would be my sister. My sister, for years younger than me, is named Lily. Sure, she has a cute face. Even cuter than mine. My adorable little sister has a slightly twisted personality. She wants to imitate me in everything. It's been like that since we were little. Be it in school club activities, clothing, hairstyles, Lily copied everything about me. Thanks to her pretty face, whatever she does looks better than when I do it, and I end up being treated as a lesser copy, which makes me feel miserable. And what's more, she always behaves as if she made the choices before me. Even when I complain to our parents, they always sided with Lily, one way or another. Our relationship as sisters isn't bad, but there have been plenty of times when I've felt the greatest hate springs from the greatest love. But when she mimicked me even in the matter of getting married, I was truly taken aback. After introducing each other to our parents, going through the engagement process, Paul and I finally started preparing for our wedding. We toured several wedding venues, compared estimates and dates, and deliberated seriously. We put as much thought into it as predicting the starting lineup of our favorite baseball team. After all that effort, we found a place where we could hold the ceremony on the anniversary of the day we started dating.
It's destiny. Let's have the ceremony here.
A few days later, I got a call from Lily.
Oh, sis. I've decided to get married too. Eh? Really? Congrats.
I genuinely congratulated her. Lily laughed happily.
I thought since you're getting married, I should too. I pushed him to propose to me. Eh?
Getting married just because I am? Is that really okay? I was a bit dumbfounded when Lily said this to me.
Guess what? I accidentally set my wedding date to be the same as yours. What? Turns out, the day you guys picked is considered lucky or something, right? We thought we might as well go with the flow.
Lucky day indeed. Sure, it was a favorable day. We decided to get married on our anniversary. Why on earth would she do something so unreasonable?
What about the guests? Huh? Isn't it better if they attend my wedding? What? I mean, come on. Guests will have more fun if the bride is cute, don't you think? You just can't pull that off, sis. What? So that's the plan. All our relatives will attend my wedding. I've already contacted everyone in our family. So, heads up, sis.
And with that, Lily abruptly hung up. No, no, no. She's already contacted everyone. How swift. I felt like a runner was forced out at home plate due to a fly ball in foul territory. If I contacted our relatives now, all I could say would be, it's the same day as Lily's. They would probably think I'm the unreasonable one and feel sorry for Lily. What a disaster. Until now, Lily's antics were only slightly annoying, but now she has directly challenged me. We had two options in the face of such a formidable adversary. Either move our wedding date or proceed as planned. A change-up or a straight play. I apologized to Paul for Lily's inconsiderate actions while sobbing. When we talked to our parents about it, they said, "We hope you two can talk it out and resolve this issue." However, they clearly expected me to be the one to give in. I cried again out of frustration and sadness. I'm fed up with my sister and parents who seem happy about ruining their eldest daughter's wedding. My husband genuinely listened to my concerns.
But you know, he said, your sister is the kind of person who mimics everything, right? If we move our wedding date, won't she just do the same and end up overlapping with us?
You're right. I replied, convinced. She would definitely do that. If we painfully adjust our schedule, only for it to be crushed again, our wedding memory would be a single word, disastrous. I refuse to let that happen.
If it's going to end up like that, there's no point in moving the date. We should value our anniversary and proceed with the ceremony as planned, he suggested. But then, none of our family or relatives will attend, I fretted. Let's think about that, he responded.
With our heads put together, my husband and I decided to keep our wedding date. Our parents were terrified at the thought of their two daughters having their weddings on the same day, causing a scramble for attendees.
Think again.
It will inconvenience our relatives. At least push it back by 6 months.
You don't say the same thing to her. She was the one who selfishly decided this. I guess you all think that if I back down, everything will resolve itself. I won't just do as you say anymore. This is my once-in-a-lifetime wedding. We didn't mean that.
When I shouted my feelings out loud, my parents were flustered. But soon they confronted me with stern faces.
Apologize. Your dad and mom didn't mean anything like that. It's rude to talk to your parents like that.
What nerve. If I were the judge, parents like these would be ejected.
That's it. I no longer see you as my parents. Goodbye. I am no longer your daughter.
And so, I had a fallout with my parents. I didn't feel sad. Instead, I felt surprisingly relieved. It was their choice. After falling out with our parents, my sister contacted me immediately.
Sis, what did you say to mom and dad? Both of them look really scared. The atmosphere at home is so tense. I told them I'm not changing the date for the wedding. What?
My sister gasped.
Huh? But all our relatives are going to come to my wedding, right? Including dad and mom, are you okay with that? I'm fine. Do as you please. I've cut ties with my parents, so I don't care about the relatives either. Oh wow, really? Then let's both have fabulous weddings.
I think my sister's audacity is amazing. She's the type to pretend she's hurt even if she wasn't hit by a dead ball. The only reason we've been getting along as sisters so far was because I've been putting up with her. I've been silently enduring, just to keep our family together. Perhaps that fueled my sister's audacity.
By the way, sis, what kind of invitations did you choose? What pattern? What color? Are the addresses handwritten or printed? I haven't decided yet. What? Make up your mind. You've got a great taste. I want to use yours as a reference.
A reference? So that means she's planning to copy me. As my husband predicted, if I were to change my wedding plans, she would follow and mimic me. Once I became aware of how much I had been enduring, my sister's copycat behavior began to feel like a tremendous stress. But wait, this might be an opportunity. An opportunity to stop unnecessary endurance. An opportunity to give a piece of my mind to my annoying sister and my insensitive parents.
I have a few options in mind. Oh, wait, I'll send you some pictures.
I decided to be unexpectedly kind to my sister. My sister, oblivious to my intentions, rejoiced with a purr of delight.
Wow, I'm so happy. I knew I could count on you, sis, she exclaimed.
If she wanted to rely on me, then so be it. Even I am capable of pulling off a trick play. After that, I lost all contact with our parents. We cut ties, after all. But I still keep in touch with my sister. As expected, she chose the same invitation I did and politely sent one to me as well. Then, she started fishing for information. So, about your wedding. I have been properly responding to her. As the wedding approaches, our frequency of contact has increased. What color is the dress? What kind of fresh flowers? What is the ratio of men to women on the venue staff? I am increasingly irritated by my sister, who asks me about everything. With a text that read, "I've chosen this dress. It looks good on me, doesn't it?" She sent me a picture of herself wearing the exact same dress I chose. If she wanted to mimic me that much, then let her. I made a phone call to my sister for the first time since the day she informed me of her wedding date.
Hello? So, I've changed the menu for the wedding a bit. What?
She was surprised.
Why? What did you change it to? I upgraded the meat dish and asked for a better drink course. I also asked them to add one more appetizer. Oh, huh, is that so? What does it look like? Do you have a picture? I want to see. Sure, but what will you do after you see it? I'll use it as a reference.
By reference, she meant to use it as a model.
Using it as a model means doing the same thing. If you want to see a picture, I'll send it, but make sure you discuss it well with your husband. Changing the menu can significantly affect the wedding expenses. You said you couldn't afford any more expenses last time. I know that, but if you guys can do it, then of course we can do it too.
That's what you think. It would be nice if you could. My sister urged me to send the pictures immediately and hung up. I let out a huge sigh. Watching me, my worried husband said,
"Why don't you stop contacting your sister? It's stressful, isn't it?"
"Yes, it's stressful, but I can't stop now. I've decided to teach her a lesson. If I back down now, I'll end up going down the same path as before. I can't stand that."
It's okay. I won't stop. This is a battle between sisters who share the same blood. What? I'm going to win this fight.
This is the WBC for my sister and me. Not the World Baseball Classic, but the Women's Bridal Classic, you knucklehead. On the day of our weddings, my husband and I were both nervous. There was the stress of being in the spotlight on one of the most important days of our lives, and we were worried if everything would go as planned. However, once the ceremony began, all the nervousness vanished. Everyone we invited was watching us with warm eyes. I was so happy that I burst into tears. The reception following the ceremony started smoothly, and I was on cloud 9. Even during the reception, I kept my smartphone close by. It was to take photos with the attendees. Then, my phone rang, thinking it might be a bad timing, but when I checked the screen, the call was from my sister. I hesitated for a moment, but then moved to a corner of the venue to answer the call. On the other end of the video call, my sister, dressed in a gorgeous outfit, was grinning.
"Oh, sister, congratulations on your wedding. What are you doing there? I'm in the middle of changing my outfit."
She said this and showed her entire outfit on the screen. It was the exact same dress I chose.
"I was wondering what it's like to have a wedding without relatives. I want to see. Show me." "Okay."
I switched the camera and showed her the venue. Seeing the situation, my sister raised a surprised voice.
"What? What's going on with your venue? It looks like a standing party." "That's right. Instead of a regular reception, we decided to have a pay-as-you-go wedding reception party." "What?"
When my sister decided to have her wedding on the same day, we realized that a regular reception would be difficult. Honestly, we felt helpless. So, we consulted with the venue staff, and they proposed this idea of a pay-as-you-go wedding reception party. We decided not to have a formal reception, but a casual party instead. We made the opening speech, the toast, and the closing speech. The rest of the time was dedicated to chatting and recreation. We asked the guests to contribute an attendance fee, and we didn't accept any gifts. The food was buffet style. Normally, a reception serves a full-course meal, so you need a large space on the table. As a result, the number of people who can sit at one table is limited. However, with a buffet style, you can increase the number of people around a table. More people at a table means you can invite more people. The attendance fee multiplied by the number of invitees becomes the budget for the reception, so the more you can invite, the bigger your budget becomes. And because it's an attendance fee and not a gift, it's easier to manage the finances. We were able to increase the grade of the food within our budget. The reason I was able to be on the phone at the edge of the venue despite being the main character is because it's a casual party after all.
I didn't know anything about that. I wasn't told.
I didn't mention it.
Why not?
Because you would have just copied it. I didn't want you ruining my special day anymore. If I told you, I would have to tell the bosses and relatives that I already invited, not to come. On the other end of the phone, my sister's mouth was hanging open, her face looking a bit pale.
That dress looks good on you. It's the one I chose. Eh? Yeah. Eh? But you're going to wear it too, right? You said you were going to change outfits.
I've already worn it for the photo shoot, so I won't be wearing it today. We're changing into the team's uniform for the rest of the ceremony.
What?
We've invited our fellow baseball fans. We're really looking forward to having a blast.
But, that's nothing like my wedding.
It might not be. Well, let's both have a wonderful day. Bye. With a full-hearted smile, I waved to my sister. I felt refreshed. It felt like I had finally settled a grueling match. I returned to the circle of guests with a bright mood. Later, I sent a postcard announcing my marriage to relatives. According to a relative who called to congratulate me, my parents avoided talking about me as much as possible on the day of the wedding. When asked if we had a fight, they replied, "She is no longer our child." Wow. So, I'm no longer their child. Just what I wished for. I don't need parents who take my sacrifices and patience for granted. I'll leave them behind. My sister was emotionally unstable in the latter half of the wedding. Up until then, she was over the moon as the star of the show. But that changed as soon as she came back from changing her outfit. She was restless and couldn't calm down. She was nervously attentive to the staff's movements and the flow of the reception. She even asked if they could change the dishes from that point on, or if there was anything that could be cancelled. How unreasonable. The venue staff must have had a hard time. As long as she was copying me, she could escape responsibility by saying I did the same as my sister, if there was any flaw. But this time, on the big stage of the wedding reception, she couldn't use that excuse. Because my sister's and my weddings were completely different. The responsibility for ignoring the budget and demanding upgrades to the food and changes to the outfits all fell on my sister. She probably started looking for a realistic line in a panic, but it was a little too late. According to the relative who told me the story, the food was very wonderful. Because they changed the usual menu to mimic the food at my wedding party, it was a special menu. On top of that, they upgraded the food, so the cost of the meal alone must have been hefty. Changing outfits also incurs costs for the dress and makeup. I wonder how much the total payment was. It's like signing a free agent without considering the team's budget. And as a result, the cost unnecessarily ballooned, the relationship with the husband's parents deteriorated, which affected the couple's relationship. Their marriage started with the relief pitcher getting burned and giving up a lot of runs, so it's no wonder it didn't go well. They apparently separated soon after they returned from their honeymoon. But my sister, it seems, can't even return to the family home she should have been able to rely on. In our parents' home, from which the crucial element, me, had been removed, the relationship between my parents and my sister seems to have become rapidly unstable. She told me everything, probably to put the blame on me, even though I hadn't asked for any of it. Divorce seems inevitable. It's a pity. But I don't feel guilty at all. When she finds her next partner, I hope she will think and act independently. Once the rush of the wedding was over, my husband and I visited my in-laws. We went to express our gratitude once again to my in-laws, who understood our decision to forego a wedding ceremony and reception with relatives, and to hold a wedding party instead. To our surprise, my in-laws had prepared a luxurious cake for us as a surprise. The room was beautifully decorated and there were pretty flowers everywhere. They warmly welcomed us, congratulating us on completing the party. Despite not being able to see their son in his tuxedo because of my circumstances, they were incredibly kind to me. I was so grateful and moved that I burst into tears. In front of my in-laws, who were holding up their cameras, my husband and I cut into the cake together. Wedding cake cutting. Despite losing heavily to the opponent's lucky 7th inning, we managed to hit a grand slam and pull off a spectacular comeback. We swept away the old family, and now it's the start of a new life. We will surely be happy from now on.
My dad is gone now, so why don't you get out of here too? Stay out of my life, forever.
The voice hurling insults at me over the phone was my daughter, with whom I'd spent over 10 years. Alice, my husband's daughter from a previous marriage, had dramatically changed her attitude towards me, her stepmother, once she started living on her own. Then, when her father, David, passed away in an accident, her hostility escalated even more. She accused me of being a fake mother and even went so far as to demand that I renounce my inheritance from my late husband. After remarrying David, I had striven to build a good relationship with Alice. But her incredibly hurtful words shattered my resolve. I became exhausted and indifferent, finding myself agreeing to renounce the inheritance. 3 days later, you knew it, didn't you? You knew and kept quiet about it. Do something about it. My daughter frantically called me, her voice strained with panic. Just a few days ago, she had told me to stay out of it, and now, she was desperately screaming for me to fix it over the phone. Feeling a deep sigh escaping my lips, I responded in a chilly voice. My name is Naomi Parker. I live with my husband, David, and our daughter, Alice. Truth be told, Alice isn't my biological daughter. She is David's daughter from his previous marriage. David and I met, or rather, reunited, at a high school reunion. The David I saw after so many years seemed a bit worn out, troubled even, compared to his high school self. Perhaps the alcohol made him more talkative than usual. About a month before the reunion, he quietly told me that he had divorced his wife and was now raising his daughter alone. Listening to his story, I learned about his struggles, the fact that his wife had cheated, leading to the divorce, and that his daughter Alice was only in the 3rd grade and quite mature for her age. He had a hard time figuring out how to interact with her.
Naomi, would you be willing to give me some advice about Alice? What? Me? I'm begging you. There are so many things I don't understand as a father, and more than anything, as a woman, you might be easier for Alice to talk to than me. Please, I beg you.
I've never raised a child before, I replied. I don't think I can give you any advice. I initially refused, but it was clear that David was genuinely struggling. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to at least listen to his concerns. At first, I simply answered David's questions over the phone. About how a girl thinks, what a girl needs, that sort of thing. But things began to change when David asked me to go shopping with him for Alice's birthday present.
I want to give Alice a surprise gift that she'll love. Will you come shopping with me?
Having offered my advice a few times already, I didn't think much of it and agreed. But it turned out to be an excuse for a clumsy date invitation from David. After we finished shopping, he said, "Let me thank you by treating you to dinner," and took me to a nice restaurant. It was there, he confessed, "The truth is, Naomi, I have feelings for you." I was truly taken aback. And with David's confession, I realized that I was drawn to his sincerity in facing his family issues head-on. So, I started dating David, and after a few dates, we started to spend time together with Alice. When David first introduced her to me, I could tell that Alice was quite wary of me. That's only natural. She had just been separated from her mother due to the divorce, and she must have been afraid of losing her father to a woman she didn't know. Even after I married David the following year, Alice didn't really talk to me. Sylvia, a classmate of mine and David's, would occasionally call me out of concern.
How's it going? Have you gotten a little closer with Alice? You guys haven't been arguing, have you?
Not at all. Even if I start a conversation, it ends with just a yes or no. It would be nice if we could even argue enough to sustain a conversation.
Well, that's true.
I often consulted with Sylvia because she also had a daughter Alice's age.
Girls are difficult, aren't they? They seem mature for their age. So, I shouldn't think of her as a kid? That might be right, you probably shouldn't treat her too much like a kid.
Sylvia, who gave me advice based on her own experiences, was a real godsend. Moreover, it turned out that Sylvia's daughter and Alice went to the same elementary school.
You suddenly became a mother to a 9-year-old, don't rush. That's right, it all comes down to that, doesn't it?
I sighed. I felt dejected, thinking that there was nothing I could do in time would eventually resolve things. David was also very concerned about the rocky relationship between Alice and me. Therefore, we decided to go on a family trip to the seaside, hoping it would serve as a turning point.
This is a beach where you can find beautiful stones, I heard. Beautiful stones. I definitely want to find them.
That day, Alice, trying to keep her distance from me, started searching for stones desperately by her dad's side. I felt a little sad at this distance, but I too began searching for stones. If I found a pretty stone, I thought of presenting it to Alice.
Nothing, there's nothing. True, though we find quite a lot of beautiful seashells. Seashells?
She must have been so engrossed in looking for stones that she didn't notice anything else. Alice looked up and glanced at my hands.
Show me the beautiful seashell. Sure, here. Wow.
In my palm was a beautiful pink seashell.
That's true. It's so beautiful. If you like it, Alice, you can have it. Really? I'm so happy. Thank you.
Alice's face lit up. Holding the thin shell up to the sunlight, she looked so genuinely pleased, her smile radiant. Then, David called out, "Hey!
I found this stone." Wait, Alice, you found something too?
He must have been searching hard. David, drenched in sweat, had found a lavender-colored seashell.
Wow, this is also beautiful. True. It's so lovely.
As the two of us peered into David's hand, our heads bumped together. Ouk! Rubbing my forehead, I looked at Alice to see if she was okay. Alice was in the same position, looking at me, and then she laughed.
It's okay, Alice, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine.
Then, with the pink shell in her right hand and the lavender shell in her left, she looked up at David and me, saying, "I'll treasure these." I feel that from that day onwards, the distance between Alice and me gradually shortened. Wishing to be closer with Alice, whenever the three of us were together, I made a point to talk with Alice more than with David. We would share thoughts about our favorite cartoons and comics. She would tell me about the school lunches she loved, we would share our dislikes, and David would give Alice and me some time to spend just the two of us. We would shop for clothes together, visit cafes with delicious limited edition sweets, and go to see movies. Slowly but surely, the look of caution and restraint on Alice's face began to fade. By the time Alice became a high school student, people around us would say, "What a wonderful family you are." I was genuinely delighted. However, once Alice started college and began living alone, she started distancing herself from me again. The responses to my text messages checking up on her were often curt and short. Even when she occasionally visited home, she mostly spoke to her father, David, and hardly talked to me. I tried to create opportunities to talk to her, like delivering her allowance in person instead of transferring it, but she would only say, "Just transfer it next time." She left no room for conversation. I tried serving her favorite foods, but she would just eat in silence. Although she treated other people normally, I could feel her attitude towards me gradually cooling down. David noticed it too, and we would discuss whether it might be her time of growing apart from parents. But even though her attitude towards her father did not change, it did not seem convincing as the reason why she was only cold to me. The joy of my daughter's return home gradually began to feel burdensome. Then, an incident occurred during the summer vacation of Alice's junior year in college. David suddenly passed away due to a work accident. Receiving the call from his company, Alice and I rushed to the hospital, but David was already lying on the bed, a white cloth covering his face. The sudden farewell, the sadness of not being able to spend his last moments together. Various emotions welled up, and both Alice and I could not stop our tears. But I had to proceed with my husband's funeral. As we struggled to keep pace with our emotions, I moved forward with the funeral arrangements, and the day arrived. Alice couldn't even stand up to speak, she simply continued crying beside her father's casket. Wanting to comfort her, I softly approached and reached out to touch her shoulder. That's when it happened.
Don't touch me!
Alice violently brushed off my hand. Then, glaring at me, she vanished into another room. It was shocking. The loss of my husband was shocking enough, but on top of that, the strong rejection from my daughter struck my heart hard. In a state of shock, I somehow managed to fulfill my duties as the grieving spouse, bid farewell to my husband, and just as I finally took a breather. During his life, my husband was greatly indebted to his aunt and uncle, who came to see me, saying, "Naomi, this must have been very tough for you with it happening so suddenly." Moreover, other relatives began to gather around me, and naturally the conversation turned to David's inheritance. Afterward, they each left, telling me, "If there's anything we can do to help, don't hesitate to ask." Left behind were just Alice and me. I was truly exhausted and was heading to my bedroom to rest when it happened.
Now that Dad's gone, you should leave too. Excuse me? I've always hated your pretend mother act. You're nothing more than a fake. What did you just?
Alice's words pierced my heart. Turning pale, I endured as she continued to hurl accusations.
Even when I was little, everything you bought for me, it was all just to get on my good side, wasn't it? No, And even now, you're here because of Dad's inheritance, aren't you? I heard it. I heard the aunt and uncle saying that Dad left behind a fortune of $3 million. Alice, that's not. I will never give it to you. Relinquish your rights to the inheritance. Don't ever come near me again.
With a twisted smile on her face, Alice glared at me. I realized I couldn't take it anymore.
As you wish, I will relinquish my inheritance rights. I'll leave this house and everything related to your father to you. I won't have anything more to do with you.
Upon hearing my words, Alice laughed with a triumphant expression. I might have imagined it, but there seemed to be a sense of relief in her expression. The next morning, I gathered my belongings and returned to my parents' house. But 3 days later, Alice, who had said to not involve herself with her, called me.
Hey! What's going on?
What are you talking about?
Dad's inheritance. You tricked me, didn't you?
I sighed deeply at her frantic voice. In fact, David's inheritance was indeed $3 million, but it was in debts. On the day of the funeral, the relatives and I discussed that due to David's business failures, there was a debt of $3 million, and we should renounce the inheritance of the debt as soon as possible. Having only heard fragments of the conversation, Alice had apparently assumed that $3 million was coming her way. Moreover, she had incurred a debt of $5,000 through credit card loans. Facing her own debt and the impending pile of her father's debts, Alice was in a frenzy.
You knew, didn't you? You knew it was $3 million in debt and you stayed silent. Do something.
Yes, I knew. And I also knew about the $5,000 debt that Alice had incurred, which I learned from Sylvia's daughter. I had planned to relinquish David's inheritance, take on Alice's debt, and support each other as we moved forward in life. But, after the altercation at the funeral, I realized that such a life was impossible. So I told her, "You were the one who said to stay out of it. You and I are strangers now, and I can't help you anymore." Interrupting Alice, who was screaming something on the other end of the phone, I quietly hung up and blocked her number. It had been almost 3 months since David's funeral. Having renounced the inheritance, I had moved out of the family home and was living alone in a small apartment. I had set up a picture of him, a vase of flowers. "I'm sorry, I couldn't protect your precious daughter," I told the picture of David. I had been filled with regret ever since I had fought with Alice over the phone and ended our relationship. Despite knowing that Alice was already in debt, I had pushed her away when she ended up taking on even more debt. Lost in thought and feeling uneasy, the phone rang. It was Sylvia. "Naomi, Alice is in serious trouble." The panicked message Sylvia conveyed was as follows. Alice had been so shocked by the $3 million in debt that she had become a recluse, unable to do anything. Obviously, she hadn't been able to renounce the inheritance. I had assumed that Alice had done so after the incident.
You have to apply to renounce the inheritance within 3 months, Naomi. What are we going to do?
I felt as though I was going to faint upon hearing Sylvia's words. It was almost 3 months since David's funeral. If we didn't hurry, Alice would definitely end up with a debt of $3 million. But I couldn't respond immediately. On the day of the funeral, Alice's words had been stuck in my mind. I really hated being treated like a mother all the time, even though you're a complete stranger. She had said this with a distorted smile. What if I tried to help her again and was rejected in the same way? Remembering Alice's eyes that day, I was too scared to do anything. I can't do it.
What if she tells me again that I'm not her mother and to stop pretending?
Naomi. Then it happened. Just when I couldn't bring myself to rush to Alice, the pendant that my husband had given me, which was placed near his picture, fell. Out of the blue, I decided to open the pendant. To my surprise, inside it were the lavender and pink seashells we had picked up on that family vacation day, along with a short note. Apparently, David had secretly kept what Alice had discarded. The letter read, "We were able to become a family thanks to these stones and shells that day. I hope we can always stay as a family and get along well," written in David's handwriting. I was overwhelmed with tears. That's right, I wanted to be Alice's real mother. I remembered that I wanted to be a real family with David's letter. Rushing to the apartment where Alice was living alone, I rang the doorbell. Alice, who looked terribly worn out, opened the door.
What are you here for now?
Her eyes were full of hatred for me. She didn't listen to what I had to say and tried to send me away.
You're the one who abandoned me when I asked for help. What are you doing now? Just leave me alone.
She said this and began throwing whatever was close at hand. I was on the verge of breaking down under the weight of her rejecting gaze. But, in truth, I
don't want to give up on you. I don't want to give up on being your mother.
Yes, there were things about your behavior back then that made me think. There are parts that I still can't accept. Feelings that are hard to forgive. However, my feelings of love for Mika as my daughter, and my feelings of cherishing her, were real emotions inside me. I reached out to hug Mika, pouring out all my feelings that I'd held in until now.
So, that's why, I want to live with you from now on, I want that.
Hearing this, Alice stopped throwing things, perhaps she couldn't hold back any longer. And she began to sob violently in my arms while she thrashed about. And, while crying, she told me that when she first saw my face, she was scared. That she might lose the memories and time she had with her real mother. That she knew I was kind to her. That it was painful not being able to accept that, even though she knew. Because it was painful, she had to convince herself that my kindness was hypocrisy. She's just doing it to be liked by Dad. The arm of Alice, who until then had been pushing away from me, I felt wrap around my back. We cried out loud as we hugged each other. The next day, we rushed to see the lawyer. The lawyer who had informed Alice about her father's debt. The lawyer told us he had been waiting for Alice's request to disclaim the inheritance. And he immediately started on the necessary procedures. In the end, Alice's disclaimer of inheritance was just in time. It was fortunate that Alice had received an explanation about David's remaining debt from the lawyer 3 days after the funeral. I turned pale when I heard that the application deadline for the disclaimer of inheritance is 3 months, but the start date of that deadline is not the day David passed away, but the day Alice properly learned about the debt. Thanks to the difference of those few days, we were somehow able to prepare the application in time. I am truly grateful to the lawyer for responding to our sudden request. As for Alice, she seemed relieved that the process of disclaiming the inheritance had gone smoothly, preventing a situation where she would have to take on a large debt, and she was in bed for a few days. After she was able to get up, she seemed to be overly cautious around me. It was Sylvia who told me that Alice seemed to deeply regret her attitude towards me on the day of the funeral.
It seems she said to my daughter, she wants to apologize but it's awkward and she can't start the conversation. That makes sense. Hey, Naomi. Aren't you being a little too careful?
Really? Sylvia on the other side of the phone said a bit angrily.
Just like when you stormed into Alice's place the other day, isn't it okay to voice your feelings more? But until Alice's feelings settle down, it's better not to say anything too strong. You decided not to give up on Alice, didn't you?
That was true. I had decided then that I wanted to become Alice's real mother. And so, I began to make an effort to convey my true feelings to Alice. In response, Alice stopped trying to hide her feelings. When our opinions clashed, we even started to argue. I was happy. 10 years have passed since my husband passed away. I was in a small hospital room. In front of me was my daughter lying next to a newborn baby. Seeing my daughter's gentle smile as she blissfully watched the sleeping baby, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness.
Mom, you can hold my baby. Is it okay?
Yes. For me, who had no experience giving birth, this was my first time holding a newborn baby. I didn't know how to pick up this soft, tender being, and my daughter laughed at my confused state.
Well, it's my first time.
My daughter sat me down on a chair, guided my arms into position, and gently placed the baby into them.
She's warm.
Tears naturally started to flow.
David surely would have loved to hold her too. You wanted to show your father the baby, didn't you, Alice?
Alice then laughed again.
Mom, you holding her is enough for me.